Birth rates have fallen off a cliff. Hello, welcome to Dangerous Policy, a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. My name is Crispin, and today in the world of unanticipated consequences of lockdown, we've had a stark and dramatic demographic shift. One of the silver lining predictions of the pandemic, one of the things that people held out hope, was that there would be a massive baby boom as a consequence of all these restrictions. People working from home, people stuck within their houses, much more likely to find something to do, copulate with their partners, have children, and thus when we emerged from this pandemic era, it was thought that, the following year we would have a spike in new births. Well, far from that being the eventuality, the exact opposite has occurred in a dramatic and terrifying fashion. So in 2020, in the United States, births declined by 4%, which is a remarkable number. This is especially egregious given the fact that access to family planning services and things that would, create delays in pregnancy, like contraception, abortion, those sorts of things, access to those services has been radically curtailed. In fact, within the United States and around the world, it's estimated that millions of births and pregnancies have resulted as a consequence not of people being at home wanting to start a family, but rather because they haven't had access to the appropriate levels of family care. Then this has been getting worse the longer the pandemic is going on. So in 2020 overall, it was a 4% decline. In December of last year, the United States experienced an 8% decline in birth rates for the month of December compared with previous years. That is insane. The amount of Google searches associated with expectant mothers, the type of searches that they undertake if they're getting ready to give birth, has fallen by over 15%. And in the United States, the dip has been relatively mild, in part because the lockdowns there have not been as severe. But if we go across the Atlantic to Europe, there are some terrifying statistics. In Italy, which already has the lowest birth rate in Europe and one of the lowest on Earth, its births for 2020 fell by 21%. 21% fewer births on an already absurdly low birth rate in 1 year. The same figure declined for Spain. Other countries such as Korea, Taiwan, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, they have all experienced birth rates the lowest point in more than 20 years. In fact, globally, the birth rate has declined more than at any point in the last 100 years. It is an extraordinary figure, and the time it has taken for birth rates to turn around, which is just what people are guessing, it's not proven yet, has already been extended beyond any such comparable event in history. So during the Great Depression, for example, there was a decline in birth rates initially, but it massively rebounded even before the world emerged from the Great Depression. Well, the same is not true during the pandemic. Even as the world has gotten used to the disease and the daily anxiety has been evaporated, well, people have not resumed the birth rates as they had previously seen. So it is possible that we have reached a new normal. Now, the consequences, if we draw these trend lines out, is immense. The Australian government had just published its 2050 predictions in terms of our demographic and society, and it has wildly reduced population estimates. In fact, that is the biggest change, both in terms of the certainty of those projections, and that we don't know because we don't know what things will look like in 5 years, let alone what will look like 2050, but also even the most optimistic estimates have lower population projections than was assumed even 5 years ago. So around the world, whether it's China, Australia, Japan, Italy, the United States, South America, population projections have reduced as people have fewer children as a consequence of the pandemic era. And for those countries that are developed countries, Western Europe, United States, and the like, these are severe consequences, that we are not going to have the tax base based on these projections able to sustain the services required for older people. So, Australia, which has relatively decent birth rates relative to much of the developed world, will not have the tax base to look after older Australians based on these current projections, and we'll need to up immigration even more than we already have in order to compensate. Well, there are many countries for whom that is not an option, either politically, socially, or culturally, and thus they will go into even more accelerated decline. In Japan, for example, they already have many more people purchasing adult diapers than children's diapers. That shows you an indication of what their birth rates are. The median age in Japan is something like 46, 47, something really, really high. The fact that they have gone through an increased accelerated population birth rate decline because of the pandemic is an absolute kick to the guts that they can ill afford. And China has just loosened its policy on children. I think people are now allowed to have 3 children in their kind of, dystopian, totalitarian control of the family structure. But even though parents are allowed to have more children, that doesn't mean that they are having more children. And the Chinese government will need to do a hell of a lot more in order to incentivize people to have children if they hope to stave off some of the worst consequences of their rapidly aging population. Now, why is this happening? This is a really good thing because it wasn't predicted. As I said, people expected that with people at home, not much else to do. That was the assumption which fueled some of the previous baby booms that we had. People coming home, people spending more time with their loved ones, trying to catch up with lost time. And so what's happened? Well, around the world, surveys have indicated that some 40% of people, whatever age and gender, have experienced a decline in their sex life as a consequence of the pandemic. Now, we can only speculate at this point because the research hasn't probably been done. All we've got is this, anomalous finding. One, I would hypothesize a few things. One, people just aren't out there meeting each other like they were. Obviously, if you're in lockdown, you have social restriction. The idea of getting like a rapid romance or, you're caught away in the drama of things that results in, family creation and all that, those kinds of periods of excitement are no longer open to us. Everyone is living cautiously. They're focused on getting the necessary supplies. They're thinking about the consequences ahead of time of what would it mean if they couldn't travel certain places that can deter them from going on different holidays and romantic honeymoons and things like that. A lot of restrictions around weddings and so forth, making it a very kind of unromantic thing. A much greater degree of uncertainty for the future in terms of, our world has radically changed relative to what it was a year and a half ago. How certain are we in our own stability and comfort in order to bring new children into the world? What kind of life for them would we be providing? And a general sense of fear and anxiety around having another person dependent on us as parents when we ourselves have a much greater degree of anxiety in our own day-to-day lives. And the whole idea is that parents are in a much greater position in terms of wisdom and wealth and capacity to provide the love and attention to raise a child in a way that they, richly need and deserve. Well, if we ourselves are uncertain about things, if we don't know how we, are coping with the lockdowns or not lockdowns, or as we emerge from this or the consequences, how effective the vaccine will be or what kind of new variants there'll be in the future, if our world seems more chaotic and less open, then we're going to be less open to change. And one thing that is a dramatic change, of course, is having children. So these are just speculations at this point. This is research that desperately needs to be done because we need to reverse this. We cannot have an accelerating decline in birth rates across the world at a time when we have rapidly aging populations. If we think about a disease that mostly affects older people and we've taken on all of these burdens and restrictions in order to protect those older people, well, we're really selling those generations down the river in the future if there's no one around to look after them. So that's something where I just want to draw people's urgent attention to. I'll leave links in the description down below to give you more information on this subject because it is a rapidly emerging issue. And if you found value in this discussion, if you didn't know about this, I certainly didn't, please hit the like button and subscribe. We talk about these important issues a lot, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much. Goodbye.